We're good? Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the July meeting of the Philipstown Conservation Board. I'd just like to start with something slightly different for a moment. I think as many of you know, Leonard Lim passed away. Some of us has worked with him, some of us know him, and I just thought we should commemorate him. And you know, my experience working with him on the application for the cell tower, I found him exceedingly intelligent, very well prepared, and I think his volunteerism for several decades in this town is exemplary. And I just want to thank him. So, with that, have we all reviewed last month's minutes? Because I would love to have a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Okay, so let's move to the application, which I believe is a minor application, if I'm pronouncing it right. William Malnati? Malnati.
So the Malnatis live at 1040 East Mountain Road South, which is almost as far as you can get in Philipstown and not be in Dutchess County. Their property has an existing house, an existing garage, a couple of outbuildings, and they have streams that go through the property. This has been here for a long time. The house has been there for a very long time. They got a building permit and converted the porch into interior space. And yes. Oh, sorry. They had got a building permit and converted this deck into interior space, and now they want to grade this area here so that they can have like a fire pit area. And there's a little bit of some rocks here that they want to take away. It's like a pile of rocks. It's less than 1,000 square feet, and I did a cut fill analysis, and it's like 3 cubic yards of cut and 4 cubic yards of cut, 3 cubic yards of fill, so there's a net cut of 1 cubic yard, which is minimal.
Okay. So, Max, your feeling was you felt this would be a minor?
Yeah, I think based on the definition of the, a minor permit in Chapter 93 of the code, it meets that criteria. I just typically wouldn't have brought this to the board, but I think I wanted to, it was such a short agenda this month, I wanted to make sure the board was aware that this project would come before the building department, and that it could be something typically I would issue a permit for without the board's oversight, as it's not required in the code, but I figured I'd bring it to your attention. Hear your comments, but I think it's a pretty minor project that we can move forward with. I don't know, the only thing I may look into is just making sure that we have environmental protections during construction and grading and all of that in place, and then
They did have a silt fence. I also show a silt fence. It doesn't, I mean, it's still grass there and everything, so it doesn't look like there was much done outside.
yeah, and in terms of the new grading and all of that. Like
Right, so the new grading is very minor. It's really just to make this a little bit more gradual and be able to have like a little fire pit area off the deck. There's a minor deck there now.
Will machine be needed to go there, or?
I don't know. Usually they might use a little, there wouldn't certainly be a big backhoe. Maybe they would use a little cat, but I don't know if they really even have to. They would have to use some machine to get the pile of rocks away.
We get clarification on that. I think really for me, it's just making sure that there's no erosion that happens and goes into the stream in the water course.
Right, so, yeah. There's enough area here that I don't think, there'll be silt fence, there won't be anything that goes into the stream.
What kind of fire pit will be there? Would it be like a portable one or something made out of, concreted stone or something?
I think it's gonna be made out of stone, and then they're just gonna have, movable chairs around it.
What's the surface going to be finished as? Like bluestone or gravel?
I think there's just gonna be a little bit of bluestone by here, and then this is just gonna be grass, they just wanna grade it out a little.
Thank you.
So it's still permeable?
Yes.
That seems pretty straightforward.
So I assume then we're all comfortable with letting Max
Sure.
permit?
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
that was easy enough. Thank you for coming in. Okay. Next on the agenda is Hudson Highland Land Trust, 410 Old Albany Post Road. Many of us might know it as Stamp Farm. This is towards the board, not the applicants, just as way of disclosure. I have not only easements from the Hudson Highland Land Trust, but we have purchased land at a discount from them over the years, and I have also walked the site with them. I don't feel I need to recuse myself, but I feel that the transparency needs to be there. If anybody feels I should recuse myself, please let me know, and I'm glad to do it.
I don't think that's necessary.
Okay.
Anyone else? In the interest of disclosure, though, I used to work for Hudson Highlands Land Trust, and I do know Katrina Schindeldecker, their executive director, quite well. We were colleagues.
So transparency really solves many issues. Okay.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Carmela Buono. I am the Preserve Manager and Ecological Restoration Specialist with the Hudson Highlands Land Trust, and I'm here to talk to you about a cleanup that we are proposing for a property off of Old Albany Post Road, the former staff farm, staff property. So this is a 96-acre parcel. For decades, it was used as a very rustic campsite, so about 15 acres of that portion had a series of cabins on it, no electricity, no connection to water. But since then, the cabins have been abandoned. HHLT acquired the property in 2022, and so we are now going forward with the cleanup of the site. Could you pass the... So we have some photos of the cabins to kind of just give you an idea of what we're dealing with here. But prior to the beginning of this project, we've already done some cleanup with the removal of some old propane tanks and a lot of any sort of environmental hazards. And so now we're moving forward with the cabin cleanup. So there's a series of about 26 cabins or so and a pump house that we are proposing to demolish, as well as remove that material and any large debris. There's a series of boats, accessory structures like sheds and outhouses that we plan to demolish, and then also clear that debris. And I'd like to say that this is a very beautiful property. The forest is gorgeous and very healthy, offers a lot of natural resources, and so the cleanup will not only be a benefit to the natural resources, but also the cabins are an attractive nuisance, so I think it's of the utmost importance for safety. A lot of folks are very interested in the property, and so in the interests of preventing trespassing and the overall attractiveness of the cabins, we would like to do the cleanup. In terms of preventative measures, so some of the cabins are located close to the lake and also around a vernal pool in the middle of the property. As Katrina moves the board, So we are proposing to put up core logs. We chose core logs instead of silt fencing because a lot of the soil is actually extremely rocky and there are tons of boulders, so I don't know if silt fences will actually hold up very well. And also just due to the sensitivity in a lot of the areas, the riparian buffer, I think in terms of soil disturbance, we opted for core logs. And then on top of that, making sure all of construction is done in the driest month, so October, if we can. Right now is probably not the best because of all the rain that we just had. And then on top of that, as much as hand removal as we can and using some compact machinery as well because the site, to lessen the amount of disturbance on the site. I think that, yeah, okay.
So all the debris that you collect from this is going to be carted off?
Yes.
Have you guys did any investigation if there's any underground tanks or oil tanks or things like that?
Yes, I believe during our Phase 1 assessment that was done and they were not discovered.
So there's not, because I see one of the buildings has a chimney sticking out of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of gas stoves.
Oh, gas,
Yes,
okay.
yes. Propane. Thank
They were
you.
using propane for lighting, for some heating, and for refrigeration.
Yeah, propane fridges, those are pretty interesting.
Melanie, you can talk about the work that we've done already.
Oh, yes, so this winter we removed about 80 propane tanks, the ones that are like my height, from the property, so that kind of lending to how the energy was used. And then several miscellaneous barrels, and then a good amount of roofing tar containers were also removed that were a threat to leaking. And that was all informed by an environmental assessment. Yeah.
Bring dumpsters on site and pack all the stuff in and
And
haul it
cart it
out?
out, yes. There's a kind of parking area field that could be like the great, away from all the riparian buffers, and I think will be a great site for that.
How long do you think it'll take?
Oh, trying to, was it a couple, the estimate from,
So, first, we're actually going to go through all of the cabins and anything that can be salvaged and reused, donated to other conservation organizations or other nonprofits. We're going to clean out all that material. It'll probably take, a week to remove all the windows so that we're not, when we're doing the demolition, there's,
Microphone, please.
when we're doing the demolition, there's no glass that's going to be added to the soil. And then, depending upon weather conditions, we're hoping, just a few weeks, but, if a storm comes or if there is some kind of unforeseen, goodness knows right now with contractors, sometimes things take longer than they have, historically, but our goal is to have it done in just a few weeks.
Really, though, I mean, just a few weeks. What's the,
The good thing is there's no real foundations.
okay, okay.
It's got a cinder block.
Right, but nothing underground.
yeah.
All cinder block.
And there might be an additional week, I left out that there's a series of outhouses, and those would have to be filled, and, yeah, an additional week.
So you'll bring in clean soil for that?
Clean, without invasives, yeah.
Around the stovepipes, sometimes, I think, especially back in the day, they probably maybe put asbestos in there. That's just something to keep an eye on when you're working around there.
Definitely.
Some of those old stoves had asbestos seals and things like that, so.
And what are your plans for the property?
Currently, we're just focused on the cleanup.
Once it's clean?
Once it's clean. We haven't really developed that yet. Yeah. Really making sure that the safety is kind of addressed first, yeah.
What's the overall plan for the site? Just return it, or?
That's what you just asked.
Oh.
Oh,
that's it. I didn't hear that,
currently,
sorry.
we do not have a plan. There's a possibility of selling it and keeping a couple cabins, but that's, we're still looking at our options.
So essentially, last year, the property went up for sale, and it had to be sold quickly. So I think one of the reasons why we're being a bit vague is our board has not had the opportunity to truly kind of delve deep into the different options. We basically had just a few months to raise the purchase price and the funding for this cleanup. So our focus was truly to make sure that the property was protected, and now, ensuring that it is cleaned up properly and appropriately so that we can then focus on the different conservation options.
So I am assuming then that the land trust is not looking to sell it for somebody to subdivide the property.
No.
She's the ecological restoration.
I'm sorry, yeah, I'm on the preserve fee management side, so acquisitions is a couple offices down.
We had been talking to Teddy Staff, the historic owner, for years. In that discussion, kind of the maximum build-out there ever was really one house site. So might it be subdivided at some point? It might, to allow for one house site and then possibly a no-build conservation easement to adjoining property owner or something to that effect. But, in everything that we have looked at, one house, probably where there's other developments, is what we're looking at, and maybe retaining one of the cabins so that someone has a changing room or something like that closer to the lake. But,
And that's
but
fine. The reason I asked the question is, and I had made some suggestions when we walked the property, was trying to, in this case, perhaps less is more, but if it was going to be sold for somebody to put in a 5-house open area subdivision, then I think that the bar would be much higher on what should be done.
I also think that there's a benefit to the land trust doing the cleanup because we have some assurance because of their mission that it's going to be done in the most ecologically sensitive way, where if it just becomes a trade land and somebody else buys it to subdivide, we have no idea
Right.
what that cleanup is going to be like.
How was the property before with sewage? Was there like outhouses? Were there a bathroom? There's no septic tanks?
There, no septic, just a series of outhouses. And you can actually see former outhouses and newer outhouses, so that was, yes.
I mean, the best way I can describe it, Tony, is think of a Hollywood back lot, but instead of being for a Western, it's sort of impoverished Appalachia circa 1955 or 60.
And I can say in the winter, it feels like you're in a slasher film.
So you've already been there, I take it?
Yes.
Is that something that has to be remediated in, like, the remaining cesspools that are there? Or
There's
pits?
not cesspools.
There isn't.
It's just a pit?
Holes.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
You have to fill them in or something?
So when I've done my research, I think, especially with the age of these, I think removing the outer structure and just fill should be enough.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you're going to be able to remove everything and anything that's there because over the squalor is manifest. There's dumps all over the place. I think the land trust can get some of this stuff up, but, dumps that have been around for 50 or 75 years, certain things just like glass and what have you sort of seep into the ground, and sometimes they're just better left as is than,
Especially in terms of soil
so
disturbance.
I don't know whether you guys want to do a site visit or you're comfortable with Max overseeing this. That's,
I think I'd recommend a site visit, you think? If the board wants to go out.
it will be one of the more entertaining site visits.
Oh, boy, now I definitely.
Oh, great.
Let's not go out at dusk, based
So-
on what
so-
Carmela's
Oh,
saying.
yes, during the light. A lot of fun things. So,
There's a barn too? I know we got an email about.
Yes,
some
there was
kind
a
of graffiti or something.
correspondence from
Yes.
a neighbor that was asking, though it is out of, quite frankly, it's pretty much out of our purview, was asking if the graffiti on the barn could be painted over. I'm not sure how long that barn is going to be with us, because the roof was never taken care of.
right. Well, and also, I believe I know who this neighbor might be, and I'd be more than happy to work with them if they'd like to help us address any. Yeah, yeah.
So you have no plans for the barn?
Currently, so originally it was part of this cleanup, but thinking about in terms of access to motorized vehicles and things, if we were to clear it, we actually were worried we'd open up pretty much just a gateway to all sorts of ATVs and motorbikes, and so the barn is going to stay. It's still structurally sound as of right now, and so and it's not close to any of the wetland area, riparian areas.
Okay, well, since you're going to be doing work there, I mean, if you could try to address it, to just keep the neighbors, happy, it would be good faith effort,
Well, maybe it can be a volunteer project with the neighbors.
That's what I was
They can
thinking.
help
Yeah,
paint the wall.
yeah. If they'd like to lend me a ladder too. Yeah,
You could Tom Sawyer it.
yeah.
I like that. All right, so then, I'm assuming that in the ideal world, but who knows what the weather's like these days, that
Right.
August is probably the beginning of the opportunity. So with that, I think we should schedule a site visit. But before we do that, I know, Peter, you were here, you were interested in what's going on. Is there any comments or any questions that you have? Microphone, please.
Oh.
Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Peter Lewis. I live directly to the north of the South Farm. I guess I had a couple of things, but I know that we're really covering just the cabins tonight. There were two things. One, we talked about safety, and two, in the letter it was talked about explorers. So I was wondering if the land trust was thinking of opening up this property to the public, or whether or not it was going to be non-public property. And the other thing was just my 2 bits, hoping that the fields, not the lawn so much around the house, but the fields would be preserved. They were only mowed twice a year. Beautiful hedge habitat, unusual, non-native, but a great habitat for indigo buntings, fishers, martins, what have you. But that's my 2 cents, and not on the agenda. But that's what I just. Thank you.
Thank you. You have any other comments, questions? So let's schedule a site visit.
Great. You'll have a lot of fun.
So,
Yeah, I guess just contact Cheryl, and then, I don't know what everyone's availability for August is.
I think we should do it
Before the August meeting.
before, yeah. Well, there is going to be no August meeting.
Oh, that's good, because I was going to have to miss it.
There is no August meeting. Yeah, I think we should try to set a date now, so, and then I can work with Max for a conditional permit. I think, once you see it, I think it's going to be relatively, it's going to be overwhelming in, I won't say the scope, but just stuff all over the place. But, I mean, I would suggest, what's best for everybody, a weekend morning?
Well, we would do a site visit, and then you guys would just issue the permit. They wouldn't have to come back in September, right?
Right, right.
Well, then we would need to vote tonight
Yeah.
on a conditional permit, in theory.
I think we can do that, if everybody's
I'm
comfortable.
trusting you guys. You were there.
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
I mean, I think what we would want for the conditional permit is that they're using, in this case, core logs to keep any erosion or material getting into the vernal pool, and there's some other little streams that move about. That all materials will be removed from site. If there is any asbestos, that you use whatever best practices there are. A minimal of machinery.
Clean fill.
Clean film, if it's even warranted. It might be once
They're gonna be removing outhouses.
Yeah,
there's gonna be pits.
something tells me the outhouses are not built in what would be optimal standards for an outhouse.
That's why I'm thinking maybe we need some dirt over whatever's there.
Well, I don't think anybody, it's not been occupied for 5 years now, true? So,
true.
Only 5 years, really?
yeah.
Excuse me, and will the permit also include the dump? You said that there were dump sites, but you can't really, they speak about, is that part of it too? that they-
Right now, that's not addressed, right? And
That's not part of our scope.
it's, my experience has been some of these old dump sites that have been abandoned decades ago, trying to clean them out sometimes is more grief than it's worth.
Encapsulation is very
Yeah.
often the better
Yeah.
So what's
practice.
it, how would you do that?
Just
Just
cover it.
soil on top?
You put clean soil, like
If it's even needed, yeah.
2 to 3 feet or something.
Because some of it just seems to be, the only thing that you're seeing on top now is some rusty cans, an auto chassis here or there, with nothing left on the auto chassis, like everything was scrounged.
pick the stuff off the surface, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And you did say that, is the parking going to be in the field that he just said? You said
Oh,
there's a
no.
Space for parking, it's going to be up where the,
So the fields that were mentioned, they are beautiful fields. No, this will be separate. This is sort of near the cabins, and it was kind of a juncture with, thank you,
I mean, the road that goes in is roughly a half-mile long.
about.
Yeah.
I'd say that's correct. So I believe the fields that were mentioned are sort of closer to the road here, to the west. But what we would use for dumpsters would be closer to the cabins, and it's sort of kind of just a fork in the road that has a clearing and would be a prime site. So I don't think there's any indigo buntings there.
Do you have any plans for restoring the area once you remove demolish the houses and restoring all the access roads that you create to get to the house locations?
We haven't put any concrete plans as of right now, but maybe some invasive species management and things, but nothing has been concrete. We have developed our management plan just this past month, and so, but we can,
Yeah, I think I'd like to see that included. I mean, just using track machinery all throughout there, I mean, we could have issues with stilt grass coming in.
yeah,
That should be a condition of the permit, is that whatever machinery is brought in and dumpsters are washed
thank you.
beforehand.
That's a good idea.
But there is a network of paths, roads that lead to the different cabins, so
So I don't think any addition, yes.
On here.
There's kind of the largest road on the property is the kind of hook here, and then there's smaller roads up between the cabins, so no new path should be created, but I like the idea of cleaning the trucks before, I think would really help, because I agree stilt grass is of concern.
Yeah, I guess returning the forest, or the site to the condition of the forest surrounding it.
That's what we're trying to do.
Would be the ideal situation. So if there's some way we could develop a strategy for each house location in a short, bullet points,
Yeah.
maybe that's the best way to go about that. But I would feel more comfortable permitting it with some sort of a plan in place instead of just removing it and there being, exposed dirt patches and everywhere.
also, if there's no plan to get rid of a dump site
Yeah.
or sites, so, you're going to all this trouble and you're going to restore it, don't you have to add the dump sites as part of the restoration?
Sure.
Well, I think, to be fair, and I think you'll see this on the site visit, most of the camp area is covered with invasives, grasses, vines, what have you, even though there was one beautiful patch of orchids that I pointed out to you, which I don't know how that ever ended up there. Most of the cabins have a very small footprint. I am going to say that the average footprint is probably 300 to 400 square feet, and these are raised up.
Yes.
So there will be bald ground, but I think that to ask for a full native restoration plan, I don't think is realistic. That's something that if the land trust decides that's what they want to do later on, that's great, but it's a big, big undertaking.
Well, could you go into, I guess, the synopsis of your management plan that you just created? I mean, what's your mission essentially for the property?
So the first was to remove the more immediate concerns, so the things like the propane tanks, and so the cleanup as a whole, the cabins, and then also inventorying species and things. But we haven't proposed any active restoration, I think is what you're getting at yet, just so, because we don't even have a picture of what the current conditions are, and so that's pretty much the scope of the plan right now is recon.
Okay. I mean, is the intention to do, you know, data collection to guide management?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. I mean, if there's a commitment to do that, and that can be addressed in your plan, and that's already authored in some form, I mean, that could be, I don't know if you can share that with us.
Sure.
Just to see like kind of what the intention is moving forward. I think that might solve that issue, potentially.
It'll solve the issue of the dump that they're removing every cottage, but they're not removing at dump sites or have no plans to
Yeah, maybe, I mean,
cover it up.
Active dump site. I mean, there was a dump site from decades ago.
And-
but there isn't a recent dump site. And the one from a long time ago is actually not embedded in the cabin area. So it would entail us removing trees and doing like cutting a road.
Yeah.
So it is removed from the cabins. The dump is,
Sites are
Yeah.
removed.
Is it also outside the wetlands buffer?
Yes.
Yes.
it's outside the wetlands buffer, and it is also pretty much capped at this point. It was mentioned that,
Naturally capped by,
I think so, I don't know the history of it,
Yeah.
but there is some debris on top, but it's a lot of household, as mentioned, cans, bottles.
Yeah, I mean,
It
what
looks
should
like-
be in the permit too is there's scattered rubbish near all the cabins that should be removed,
All right,
which I'm assuming will be removed
yes.
So we need to vote on conditional permit tonight.
if they're going to be able to do this in August, yes.
Yeah, based upon the conditions that you guys just outlined,
Yeah.
right?
Is everybody comfortable with that?
I'm good with that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it seems pretty clear what you want to do, so.
I guess, not to jump in again, but I definitely want to just impress that, like, I think it's great that the houses are going to be removed, but I think taking that additional step to ensure that you're improving the property even further before either, you know, changes, you know, ownership. I don't know, maybe you can go into a little bit how HHLT, would it be like an easement situation if when you sold the property?
Yes.
Okay,
So you are.
No, sorry.
potentially?
If it were to be sold,
Yeah.
there would be a conservation easement.
Okay. With easements like that, does HHLT have any investment in like, you'd no longer manage the land around, at that point, it would just be holding it with the deed restrictions in perpetuity?
I'll give an example of a recent project that we did, where we acquired 75 acres, and we subdivided that land. And on that 75 acres, 40-plus acres was conveyed to a neighbor with a no-build conservation easement, so that nothing would happen on that 40 acres. It was basically additional land that they could hike on. We approached neighbors on the other 30 acres to see if we could find someone to buy that 30 acres with a no-build conservation easement, and actually waited a few years to see if someone was interested, because there was a turnover in ownership. And then when no one was interested in doing that, we then sold the land with one house site on about 2.8 acres, in one very kind of flat, open location. Someone can put a house and accessory structure, but the remaining land had a no-build area. So of the 75-plus acres, 2.5 acres will allow one house and accessory structures, and the rest, is, in perpetuity, no build. So that is something, that's kind of the worst-case scenario for this property as well. Potentially allowing a house somewhere, where there are already existing houses. And then, if there's one cabin that's in good condition and can be salvaged, allowing that to stand so that it could be a changing room, a place to get out of the sun after, a day on the water. But we acquired this as a conservation buyer to make sure that it was protected.
Yeah, no, I understand.
And so, we're working on, when we acquired the property, we got a Phase 1 environmental site assessment, and there were recognized environmental conditions that were listed on that. And for that, they basically said that the paramount issues to address were the barrels on the property with miscellaneous material that were posed a risk to the water quality. So that was the first thing we did. We then removed all of the tanks because, propane tanks, hot, cold. There was a fire just across the road this past spring, so we wanted to make sure that we were removing that as kind of this next step. And then really removing these structures and, looking at invasive species removal, allowing things to kind of renaturalize some, and looking at what would make sense to kind of make sure that as we remove the structures and as we remove the invasives, new invasives aren't kind of repopulating, and then kind of taking a step back and saying, okay, what are the viable conservation options for this land? Be it convey it to a neighbor, subdivide it, allow a house site on 10 acres, and then convey the rest to a neighbor, and looking at the different iterations then to find the option that best meets our mission to protect natural resources.
Yeah, I think you touched on it, but my thought was as long as there's involvement from HHLT's end initially to have this active management perspective and before you choose that conservation option that you're talking about, I think that's kind of what I was trying to get at, to make sure that you were still involved, even not just from a conceptual, perspective.
If in 5 years we sell this land, we will still hold the conservation easement and monitor it routinely. So when we hold a conservation easement, we have a baseline documentation report that codifies and kind of documents the existing conditions. And then we walk the property at least once annually to make sure that the landowner and the adjoining property owners are basically adhering to the terms of the conservation easement. So we will basically, even if we don't own the land, we will still kind of hold a stewardship role.
Yeah, and while you do, you have that opportunity to steward the land. So that was kind of.
And that gets made, it's in it like a deed restriction?
So deed restrictions can be extinguished. Conservation easements to be extinguished have to go to court. So truly, they're designed to be perpetual. They're drafted in a way that they are strict enough to protect the conservation values of the property, but kind of flexible enough so that as conditions change over time, like conservation easements in the 1980s, didn't consider solar arrays, but there was language in them talking about utilities. So it was flexible enough to kind of, as technology evolves, to ensure that you're still protecting the conservation values. So, yes.
I think overall, we're very, the proposed project is to address the cabins, which are just the most immediate issue. But Max, if you want to talk more about restoration and things, it's not part of the scope of this, but.
I guess I was just getting maybe a little bit of sense from some of the board members that could be something that is important as well, but maybe not completely necessary at the scale that it could be perceived, but maybe there's a happy medium to making sure that there's some language in the permit that kind of reiterates that, it's not going to be like bare excavation areas that can just reestablish with invasives, or like there is an intention, for the property to be as native as possible or in best environmental condition as possible.
Right.
Yeah, I completely understand that. And I think a visit would also help you get a better idea of the footprint also of what will be made bare and kind of like left. I know outside of the actual disturbance from the vehicles and things, but from the actual cabins, I think that could all be addressed with a visit.
So we comfortable issuing a conditional permit? Do I have a motion?
A motion to issue a conditional permit.
Second. I'll second. Okay, all in favor?
Hi.
Aye. So I'll work with you on getting a draft on that.
All right.
All right, so let's, yes, that's what I was about to.
Sorry.
what works best for everybody? Is it like a weekend morning, afternoon,
Is that
Yeah, the morning probably would be better.
morning?
is on the morning and the day?
So any particular weekend?
This weekend.
Before the 6th of August, if possible.
They're trying to get started by August, aren't they?
Yeah, I think it's gonna depend on the weather conditions. I'd like to think we're done with rain for a bit.
All would.
Famous last word.
I'll go for that.
So, I mean, I don't know, people available this weekend?
Is that the 15th, Saturday?
Yes.
Yeah,
I
no,
am.
I can't, this weekend. I'll have to help move my daughter again, I think, this weekend.
22nd?
Yeah,
I
that's
can't
okay.
do the 22nd, sorry.
Oh, why not?
Could miss Community Day, would be a nice excuse.
What's that?
I'm good for the 22nd or the 15th.
29th, I think 22nd was out.
Oh,
Was it?
Saturday, Sunday maybe?
Yes, Sunday.
I can.
I could do
That's
29th
okay, you
or
guys, I'll trust you
30th.
guys.
I can do.
How was the 29th or 30th?
I could do the 30th.
30th?
30th?
It's a Sunday,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I can't do Sundays.
29th?
29th?
29.
I, are you?
29th?
Okay.
29th?
For the
Yeah, I'm good for that. Going once, going.
Okay, so.
29th.
29th. What works for everybody, 9 o'clock?
Yeah, early is better, yeah.
9?
Are you doing it? You have a long drive,
Yeah.
maybe 10?
If you can do 10, that's preferable, because I'm coming an hour and a
Just to
half.
come from Germantown.
I can see if I
10.
can start late.
I used to live in Germantown when I
And-
went to Bard.
And, I mean, Carmel is actually around. We actually have an invasive species task force, strike force at one of our properties doing invasive species management.
I'll be in Putnam Valley, so I'll swing over.
So 10 o'clock on the 29th?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we will make sure that the road is cut back.
Oh, yes, we'll update everyone. We're currently checking the status of the road after the storm, so we're not sure what the conditions are, but I'll get back to everyone.
Won't drive my Prius.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any old or additional business?
We did get an email today from Fox Hollow with the bridge repair, and they're gonna need to readdress, I believe, their approach because of this last storm. I think that they took some more damage, so
It did.
they have not started work or anything like that. So they're reaching back out to us to kind of, figure out their next steps. So it's the only real update
Okay.
we have.
Okay, with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?